Hello everyone and welcome back to another Wizard 101 video. I am high out of my mind on caffeine. Don't take that out of context for the first part, or you can, that's fine too. I've had a lot of caffeine and very little sleep. I'm on like 3 hours, so I'm like, what better video to do than a good old-fashioned tier list? So today, what I've got here is I've got the worlds. Now, it's been a while since I've done just a world ranking. I did my rating each world, but that's not exactly what I would rank the worlds in regard to a tier list. So I decided that I would do another tier list. I think the last time I ranked the worlds, it was months ago, probably like 8 months ago or so. So I'm going to do it again, but this time we have a little bit of a twist, a little bit of a curveball thrown in there. We have the Pirate 101 worlds as well. You can see here Skull Island, Monquista, Cool Ranch, Mushu, Marleybone, Valencia. So I can rank those as well and have a good time doing it. My opinions on worlds constantly change, so realistically, if you think you already know what I'm going to rank all of these based on my opinions, you could be wrong. I mean, you could be right, but you could be wrong as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off with Wizard City. Now, Wizard City is very much problematic for me because it's a world that I have very mixed feelings on. Wizard City is obviously an amazing world. It's near and dear to many people's hearts, and it's a good starter world. The problem I have with it is the fact that Wizard City isn't the same as it used to be. Now, I'm not saying all changes are a bad thing, right? Like, for example, the graphics update. I think the graphics update is amazing. But I'm not going to lie to you and say that I don't miss the old Ravenwood music. The old Ravenwood music was some of the most nostalgic in the entire game to me, and that soundtrack is no longer used. On top of that, the quest lines have been vastly changed, and I definitely miss talking to Private Stilson outside of Unicorn Way, I think that's his name, and saying, "Halt, none shall pass." And then, you're like, "Oh, here's my letter." He's like, "Seems legit." And then he lets you in. I miss that, right? And I will never talk to him again because he is, as far as I know, no longer used in any quest lines. Nolan Stormgate, I miss him as well. And that's not to mention, Private Quinn, all the old characters that I used to like that are now kind of meh. So with that said, I'm going to have to give Wizard City a classic C tier. I'm actually going to add a single row below this. I originally wasn't thinking of adding an E tier, but I figure it just makes things balanced so I can show that, yes, Wizard City is a true middle of the road. Old Wizard City would have been an S. Now, sadly, it must be a C. Next up, we have Crocotopia. Now, Crocotopia is a world I've had very, very wildly differing opinions on. You may know back in my old lists, I used to rank Crocotopia very, very highly. I think Crocotopia, for me, is one of the most nostalgic worlds in this entire game, probably the most nostalgic world in this entire game, and I really can't rank it too lowly. Now, I would say, as I'm getting older and doing Crocotopia more and more, I can recognize some of the faults it has. It's not very well paced, the story is a little bit meh, none of the enemies are particularly too challenging. Overall, it's just kind of it's an iffy world. But I will say, I still like Crocotopia more than I like the new Wizard City, and I will say this, I think Crocotopia is an amazing world for getting people into this game. I don't know about you, but I think a first impression is incredibly important, but what's equally as important, and most people underestimate, is the follow-up to that first impression. Obviously, the first impression matters, but if you don't continue the second impression, you're not going to set a precedent for being good. And in this case, I think that Crocotopia does that really well. Wizard City shows what the game has to offer, and then Crocotopia doubles down on that and shows that the game actually has more to offer rather than that. Obviously I said the pacing is a bit messed up, but as a new player, you're probably not going to notice that. Most times I don't. I do think Crocotopia is still pretty good. I just think, it's not higher than a B, unlike what I used to give it. Next up is Wisteria, and I'm going to try to not keep all of the world explanations extremely long because otherwise this video is going to be 30 minutes long. I'm going to try to keep it to 1 minute each or so. The last two were just kind of exceptions to that. Wisteria, I think Wisteria is good. It just really needs to be expanded upon. I'm going to give it a D. I think Wisteria really has potential. I think it's really good, but it has so much more potential for being good. Like, if they expanded on it with, say, multiple more tournaments, making the quest line a little bit longer, making it so that you can access their schools of magic. Overall, there's plenty of things they could do to make Wisteria better. I just don't think they capitalized on that. Next up, we have Marleybone, and specifically Wizard 101's Marleybone. I think Wizard 101's Marleybone is easily an S tier world. The aesthetic is perfect. It's amazing. The pacing is amazing. The enemies feel unique and interesting. And overall, I just think that this world is one of the best in the game. It doesn't overstay its welcome, but if you want to stay there for longer, there's plenty of really good side quests to do as well. Buckingham Palace was a really good addition. Overall, I'd say Marleybone is just really, really solid. Overall, I'd say it's just Marleybone is really, really good. It's one of my favorite worlds in this game, and that's not going to change, I don't think. Next up, we have Grizzleheim. Now, since Wintertusk is not a separate world, I need to include Wintertusk in this. With Wintertusk, I would say Grizzleheim is a solid B or A tier world. I would say Grizzleheim is a C tier world similar to Wizard City. It has a lot of potential. It just has significant problems where it has problems retaining my interest. The XP drops are very pathetically low. Like the level 40 XP, you gain maybe like half a level from Ravenscar, and Ravenscar is a lot more difficult than even Dragonspire. So I would say that that kind of debuffs it, but Wintertusk is really, really fun. It gives a lot of XP, and I'd say it's a genuinely fun challenge. It gives really good gear. So I'm going to put this into B tier. I think Wintertusk is an A, Grizzleheim is a C, so might as well average the two. Okay, so for the next world, for some reason they only included Aquila on here once, despite the fact that it is a Pirate 101 world as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it to Pirate 101, but I'm just going to tell you my thoughts on Wizard 101's Aquila. I think Wizard 101's Aquila is more a B or C tier world. It's really interesting, but it could be vastly expanded on, which it really was in Pirate 101. So I'm just going to save my ranking of Aquila for Pirate 101 section, but that gives you some thoughts on it. Next up is Mushu, and as much as I try, I cannot understand the people who dislike Mushu. Mushu is just so solid, and I still don't understand why people don't like it. The vibe is impeccable. It's just amazing. The quest line is super fun. No enemy is too challenging and none are too weak either. Like the Jade Oni is a genuinely interesting challenge in my eyes. It's overall fun. It doesn't take too long. Like Mushu is still a decently short world. It's not too short either. Like it lasts longer than Marleybone, but it's definitely like shorter than Dragonspire for sure. Really, I don't know. I've tried to understand. I guess the only complaint I've seen is that there's too much walking, but that just means you're not using marks enough. So really, I'm just going to put it in A where it belongs. I think it could be an S tier world, but I think what's stopping it from being an S tier is simply the fact that its graphics could be a bit better. And let me tell you, in the future, its graphics do get better, but we'll get to that. Next up is Dragonspire, and Dragonspire is a really fun final world. I would argue it's my favorite of Wizard 101's final worlds. I'm probably going to stick it right in the B tier. I think it's solid. I think if any world, though, in Arc 1 needs a graphics update, Dragonspire needs a graphics update. Like, the graphics just look genuinely bad, and it kind of hurts my eyes to go through. It's a bit dull. It's just overall, it needs an update, I would say. But I do like Dragonspire as a whole. I think its length is really good for pacing-wise in Arc 1, and it's just overall a solid world. Next up, we got Celestia, and Celestia, for me, is going to have to be an E-tier world. Celestia is a really, really bad world. In my opinion, it really needs reworks, but I don't think it's like an F tier. It's not definitively the worst. I would say that Celestia has the problem with really awful pacing where it's kind of meh, and then also its story is a little bit lackluster because there's no true main goal, I feel like, compared to some other worlds, right? Like Zepharia is finding all the students and stopping Morganth. Avalon is getting the Sword of Kings and also learning about Morganth's backstory, stuff like that. Celestia is just kind of like you're introduced to Morganth, you're told she exists, and you see the effect she has on worlds, but really you don't get too much exposition wise, and you don't for Celestia either. I feel like Celestia isn't expanded on as much, so I'll just put it there in E tier. Next up is Zepharia, and Zepharia is a really solid world in my opinion. I think it's a very underrated world. I think a lot of people don't view it as it should be viewed, and I think that it's a solid A tier world. I think its pacing and story is really good. The only section I think that drags on is Drum Jungle. The enemies are really cool, the aesthetic is really cool, the music is great. Overall, I think it fits perfectly in that A tier where it's better than these worlds, but obviously not as good as something like Marleybone. It's just a solid world overall, I would say. Next up on our list is Avalon. And Avalon, for me, really has to go into S tier. I just love everything about Avalon, from the music to the adventure to everything. It gives me heavy, like, Game of Thrones-esque vibes, and that's really just the medieval setting is really cool, and it's something that's always really interested me. Without a doubt, it's always my favorite kind of thing to go for, and after learning about like King Arthur and King Arthur's legend, it's always really cool to relate that. I feel the same way about like Sherlock Holmes and Marleybone. It's just really cool to relate it to real life references. I really love Avalon. I think the only letdown is that the Sword of Kings is pathetic, which yes, that does matter in the long run. I've explained it a few times, but the short end explanation is basically we're supposed to be using it to defeat Morganth. It's supposed to be a god tier weapon, and it's really just pathetic, like immediately trashed or thrown in the bank. Overall, that's the one downfall of this world, but I do really like it otherwise. Next up, we have Azteca, and Azteca for me is probably going to have to be my first F tier world. I think Azteca isn't bad aesthetic-wise. It's not bad music-wise. What's bad is how long this world drags its ass. It really is just painful. There's no redeeming qualities in questing in it. The bosses have dual typing that's hidden. They have insane crit outputs. Overall, it's just not balanced in my opinion. There's this one section of quests that's like 40 quests long that's completely irrelevant. Like in between Salt Meadow Swamp and Zoltan Dock, there's just like 30 quests that you do for no reason. I'm just gonna say I think it's an F tier world. It could be easily redeemed if they kind of just like cut out some of the quests, reworked the enemies, and made it a little bit more balanced. Next up on our list is Chrysalis. Now, Chrysalis for me is divided into two parts. Now, I would say Chrysalis Part 2, I actually think is pretty solid. I think the pacing's really well done, and the climax is amazing. The streets are much better, and overall it's solid. It would be B tier. Now, Part 1, on the other hand, is slow, it's agonizing, it's dull, and it's just overall not very good. The only good part about it is that you get shadow magic, but I would say it's still F. I'm going to average between the two, and I think it's a D tier world for me. I think it's solid, but it definitely needs some cutting down on quests. Like, it needs some culling. Like, no world in this game, in my opinion, needs 277 quests. Never should there be a world that is 277 quests. So I'm gonna have to put it there. Next up, we have Darkmoor. Now, obviously, I can't rank Darkmoor too highly because we haven't been to it outside of Castle Darkmoor dungeons. I'll put it down here. I think aesthetic-wise and like vibe, it's solid. It's up here, SA tier. It's one of the reasons why I like the Night Forest in Lemuria so much. I love the dark and like the dark aesthetic compared to, say, Chrysalis's dark aesthetic. It's a different dark aesthetic, definitely. But obviously, really the only experience we get is a difficult dungeon that has a bunch of really stupid people inside of it that are really hard to work with, and also a bunch of toxic people that are really also hard to work with. So I'm gonna just put it in E tier where it belongs, I would say. Next up is Polaris, and Polaris has to be another S tier world. It is really just amazing. They really hit us with like the whole bait and switch, right? They had the end of Arc 2, which was really agonizing, really long, and then they were like, okay, how do we fix this? And then they hit us with the Polaris changes, which were lower enemy health, much better pacing, but it still felt organic and fun in my opinion. Polaris is solid. It's one of my favorite worlds in this game. The only thing I think it needs right now is an XP rework, because every single time I finish Polaris, I am like level 115, 114, and I'm supposed to be like around level 110. So I think that needs to be reworked a little bit. Next up is the Arcanum, and the Arcanum for me is hard because I don't even consider it a world. It's kind of like more of a space station above the spiral, I would say. But there isn't really anything particularly interesting here. I'm just gonna put this into like E or F tier just because I don't think it deserves to be included with all these rest of the worlds, because there isn't a storyline, there isn't a quest line really. I mean, I guess you could consider the like thing you do with Velma a quest line. There's that, but realistically, I hate most of the Arcanum professors. I hate the fact that they're like, oh, why did you release Old Cobb? That is evil. And I'm like, okay, where were you trying to stop Morganth? I don't know, sitting on your ass maybe? Get off your ass, like, calm down. The only professor, like, there's a few professors I like. Like, I really like the life professor, Xander. I really like, what's her name? Jackie, who's like the balance professor who is cracked out of her mind. I relate to her a lot. I like them, but most of the other professors are just kind of lame, a little bit boring. I guess Ignis is kind of cool as well. It's really just Ione that I dislike, actually. Mirage is another really, really solid world. I'm going to put it right up here into A tier, where I think it belongs. It's really good. The story, the characters, all amazing in my opinion. The world's just really solid, really sick, just a good world overall. The main downfall is probably Ishtar, to be honest. Really, it's just a solid world though. Next we have Imperia, and I actually used to really dislike Imperia because I thought it was really long. The problem is that I was just too lazy to quest through it for a while. So I'm just gonna say that it's a C tier after redoing it. I think it's a solid world. I think it's good. I just don't think it's as nearly as good as most of these other worlds. Like, I would rather do any of these other top 9 worlds here than do Imperia, in my opinion. Next up, we have the Catacombs, and the Catacombs for me has to go into like E or F tier. Actually, I'm just gonna put it into F tier. It looks disgusting. I hate the trash theme and like the kind of Catacombs theme. I never really have liked like dark Catacombs, sewery type things. Maybe Oblivion scarred me of sewers, but you know, take it as you will. I think a lot of the bosses are like too much brain power for me, or either that or they're really easy and I'm too lazy to farm them. Also, I have to interact with a lot of people that I think are, you know, a little bit dumb. You know, people who just like farm Dragoon gear for a living that really are just have a skewed concept of this game, I would say. Catacombs just is a bit meh. Also, I've said before that I think balance-wise, the Dragoon gear is a bit unbalanced. I know a lot of people don't agree with that, but that's okay. You can disagree with me. Next up, we have Caramel. Now, Caramel, in my opinion, is one of the most solid worlds in this game. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I have always loved Caramel. I think the aesthetic is amazing. I think the lessons of the world and the storytelling is kind of cool, the themes of it. And really, I think the story writers did a really great job with Caramel. And I would recommend everyone give the dialogue a listen, maybe, or kind of pay attention to the story. It's a really good story. I love it. And I just think it's good. I loved the aesthetic of it. I know a lot of people were like, but it's childish, whatever. Bro, grow up. No one cares if it's childish. Like, maybe just let people indulge in what they want to indulge in. But, yeah, I just like Caramel. Moving on. Next up, we have Lemuria, and Lemuria isn't actually an icon on here, but I can still rank it. I think, after playing it, Lemuria for me is an S tier world. I think I really like how it was done. I love the characters, I love the difficulty of it, and I really liked almost every area in it. So I'm just gonna put it at S tier. Maybe not everyone will agree with me, but I think it's cool. I think the final fight is a really cool twist. So I'm gonna put it up there. If you disagree with me, that's okay. I don't care. Finally, we're getting into the Pirate 101 worlds, and these ones really interest me, and I definitely wanted to rank them, which is why I found this tier list. So let's just get into it. Skull Island. Now, Skull Island, for me, I'm gonna probably put as a B tier world. I think it's really cool. I obviously really like it. I love the music. The music especially is just like, I could listen to it all day. The pirate aesthetic is super, super cool. My main issue with it is what they did to Blood Shoals. Blood Shoals, if you don't know, used to have like 3 kind of shortish quest lines. making the world kind of total about 3 hours in length, which is pretty solid for a first world. It's longer than Wizard City by a long shot. I think what they did is they took the Blood Shoals. First off, they made the paywall at Blood Shoals. I think before it used to be after Blood Shoals, which I don't really know exactly why they changed it. But now they kind of have that whole Azteca section, they have the whole shark section, and they had like, what is it, Grand Admiral Prawn, based off Grand Admiral Thrawn. Kind of cool. I just think it's a little bit lackluster, a little bit lame, a little bit meh. I'm going to put it into B tier. But the rest of the world is really cool. Next, we have Monquista, and I have always loved Monquista. I know a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people have said it's a kind of a shorter world, a little bit of a more lame world, but I think it's cool. I think it's a B-tier world. I love Gortez. He's really cool. I love the different governors, the different queens, all really solid characters, and it's just a fun world overall. I love the aesthetic, and I really like the orangey colors. It's really cool. Next, we have Cool Ranch, and it's been so long since I've done Cool Ranch. For some reason, like, I haven't done Cool Ranch in Pirate 101 in probably years at this point, but I remember thinking that it's very long, and there was an area I didn't like where it was like a ghost town kind of thing underground. I forget exactly what it's called, so that part was probably a bit more lame, but I think a lot of it's really cool, and I like the Western aesthetic. But I will say, I've never been the biggest fan of Western and kind of cowboy things. I think it could go A tier, but I'm not really willing to put it there. I think like the people who would think it's really good would put it like A tier. I would personally put it C tier just because I don't like the aesthetic, so I'm just going to average in the middle with a B. Next, we have Mushu in Pirate 101. Mushu in Pirate 101, let's be honest, I don't know if you've done it, but it's so good. It's everything that Wizard 101's Mushu was, like the really solid quest line, the really cool aesthetic, the music, everything like that, mixed with amazing graphics. Like, the graphics have been updated and exactly are what I want from Wizard 101 Mushu graphics. So I just have to put it into S tier. It's so good, and I want to do it again. And I hope I can sometime in the future do Pirate 101 Mushu again. It's been so long, but I really want to. Next up is Marleybone in Pirate 101, and this for me also has to be an S tier. Similar to the Marleybone and Wizard 101, it's really good pacing wise, really fun, and I love the fact that we have to deal with the consequences of our actions. Not to spoil the story too much, but I made a video on it like once upon a time. Basically, we started a war between Marleybone and the Valencians, and now we have to deal with the repercussions of that, and that's that Catbeard, who we kind of helped start the war, is now in jail. We have to get him out of jail, and to get him out of jail, we need to side with the Marleybonians and become like a Grand Admiral of their fleet and kind of help them destroy the Valencians. I've always loved that. I think it's a really cool quest line. If you haven't done it, you should do it. It's really fun, and Marleybone's just cool. Next up, we have Aquila, and Aquila, I would say, in Pirate 101, Aquila is a bit lackluster in my opinion. It's cool, but I would say it's a bit difficult, and the quest line isn't like my favorite. But I would say the aesthetic and the Greek mythology references, I just have to put into A tier. I love the world, and I always have loved the world. And I think Pirate 101 does an amazing job of expanding on Wizard 101's Aquila. And I just wish that I could see Aquila and Wizard 101 expanded a bit more. I think it would be really cool, and I hope that we go there in the future. Next up, in the final world on our list, man, this video is 30 minutes. I need to cut this down. I need to stop making very long videos. Finally, we have Valencia. Now, Valencia is split up into two parts. There's the very short part 1, which I would probably put like C tier, and then there's part 2, which I would put like B or A tier. I'm actually just going to throw this into C tier. I think it's cool, but I think it was a bit rushed of an ending, and I think Pirate 101 could have expanded on it a little bit more, a little bit better, in my opinion. Some people might not agree with me, but that's okay. You can feel free to disagree. I think it's just a solid world. I like the aesthetic, but it's never really... robot kind of automaton thing hasn't always been my favorite plotline. I will admit to that. But I think this is a pretty solid tier list. It's a little bit spread out, a little bit more spread out than usual, I would say, but I tried to make it kind of spread out. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, do you agree with these rankings? What rankings do you disagree with? I am interested. But otherwise, that's it. I'm not gonna drag this on for too much longer. I gotta cut this down. Make sure to drop a like, hit the sub button. Go support me financially on Patreon, and thank you to the NJA09 for joining the $25 tier. I do appreciate that. And finally, go join my Discord server. We just hit 400 members. We're a pretty solid community, but that's it. Thank you all for watching. I will see you in the next video. Adios.